have a mandate to vote against the rise and top-up fees, you then act upon it. Because I think that's what leads to disillusionment, and people see promises they were made against the backdrop of people trying to hide from the decision. People came out and they used it as political capital, they gained from it, saying, no, we're strong enough to speak out on this. And then to go against that, I think that is what is really disillusionment in this country.
Well, firstly, on the issue of the promises that politicians make and their ability to deliver on them, I don't want to reduce what is an unbelievably controversial, difficult issue to some sort of trite assertions. But we didn't win the election. You know, you can deliver on your pledge if you have untrammeled authority to deliver on it. You know, one option would have been to say, well, since no one won the election, we should carry on having elections until someone's won outright and they can deliver their manifesto in full. We took the decision, you can complain about that decision, we took the decision that partly because of the economic circumstances, partly the need for stable government, we had to do something new instead, which was two parties coming together and being quite overt. No one can claim that myself or David Cameron were not quite overt that that process meant that we could not and would not stand by our manifesto, because we didn't have a mandate to do so. Right? 24% of the people who voted for the Liberal Democrats. We did not, however, win the election. I did not have a mandate to drive through a policy which, as it happens, on higher education, was diametrically opposed by both the Labour and the Conservatives. So then you ask yourself, what do you do when you're actually in government, when you're actually dealing with concrete choices? Now, as you all know, the pledge came in two parts, one about the fees and the other one was to introduce a fairer system. I passionately believe, I know we're not getting much of a hearing about it, but I passionately believe that when people look at the details of what we're introducing, it is a lot fairer than what exists at the moment. And if you don't believe me, let me just illustrate that by some facts. For the first time, all students, full-time and part-time, will not pay any upfront fees at all. Students, for the first time since fees were introduced, won't pay a penny. Nothing. It'll only be money you pay back once you start earning money. And then you'll only start paying back once you earn a lot more than you do under the current system. And then you'll pay a lot more, according to our sliding scale of interest rates, if you earn a lot more. So that basically you're creating a progressive cross-subsidy, which doesn't exist at the moment, under the kind of poll tax imposition of fees imposed on students, whereby if you're a squillionaire from Goldman Sachs, you'll pay over the odds for your education, providing a cross-subsidy for poorer students, all of whom, and this has been independently verified, will pay much, much less than they do now. And because we've lengthened the period of time during which people pay back through the graduate contribution system, all graduates will pay less per month than they do now. Now, I would love to wave a magic wand. I believe you me. I would like this more than anybody else to say, oh, I made this pledge, I won the election, I'm just going to deliver it. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. So what we really tried to do, we worked at this for months, we looked at alternatives, we looked at the graduate tax alternative, which is being advocated by the National Union of Students, and now at least part of the Labour leadership. That would be much more regressive. Much more regressive. We've actually introduced a more progressive form of graduate contribution than is actually being advocated by the people who are demonstrating. So if I express any frustration, it's not that I don't understand anger and control, I do. But I wish people wouldn't kind of start from a starting point which just, you know, it's just not in sort of in connection with what happened. No one won the election. We put forward a set of proposals which we need to explain over and over again, which are progressive, that people pay back later when they're graduates, when they're earning much more money than they do at the moment, where people particularly earning less money will pay less. I genuinely believe that if we get these proposals through, I hope we will, I really hope in 10, 15, 20 years' time, the biggest demonstration of the success of the ideas will be more bright youngsters from underprivileged backgrounds going into university, because the whole policy has been designed to boost rather than hinder social mobility. And that for me is one of the most important things that we need to do with universities, is to allow university to become not just a province of, not exclusively but largely the educated middle classes, but also a genuine trampoline for onward social mobility for far, far too many young people who at the moment can only dream of going to university but don't go.
Hi, so my name's Portia and I attended a talk given by Nick Clegg by the Hansard Society today. And after his talk I decided that I'd ask him why, if choice and control from voters over politicians is so important, he signed a pledge before the election saying that he would vote against any increase in tuition fees, and yet now has unveiled a plan that would triple tuition fees. I asked it because I don't think he's taken any opportunities to hear from students since he unveiled the policy. There were 2 occasions when he was meant to be hearing from students in the last month. Him and Vince Cable were meant to be speaking in Oxford, and both times they've backed out. They've been too scared to speak to students. So I feel like having the opportunity today, it was the least I could do to at least try and get an answer from him. I think the question unsettled him a bit, or maybe he was expecting someone to ask it. And he seemed quite annoyed. And I don't know if that's because he genuinely thinks that what he's doing is a more progressive policy, even though it's going to put off a whole generation of youngsters who are facing poor employment prospects anyway. I don't know if it's that he genuinely believes it's progressive or if he feels so bad about going back on his promise. But what he said was, it's not really a cost anyway, you only pay it back when you're earning. It shouldn't put people off because they'll pay it back in the future, it's no upfront fees. I think that he was right in that it's more fair that part-time students shouldn't have to pay up front. But I don't think that you had to do that as part of a package of raising fees overall. What I think is especially upsetting about raising fees to £9 grand is that it's not going to get students any more. They're actually going to get less, because the rise in fees will just about offset the cuts to teaching grants, which is ridiculous. It means that people going to university 2 years after I did will pay 3 times as much for a worse experience, which just seems really unfair. I just studied politics, philosophy and economics at Oxford, so me and Nick and David and Ed and all of the politicians have something in common there. I did the same degree.
And what are you hoping to do now?
I'm hoping to learn more about politics and get more involved in trying to save our country from the biggest cuts since before Thatcher. I think that's a really important thing to do, and try and make sure that what the government's doing at the moment doesn't disproportionately harm the most vulnerable, which I think it unequivocally will.